Right, we have concluded successfully Act 1, Scene 1 up until Scene 6, where Scene 6, Thami expressed using a monologue, and we got to get an idea that he is now indeed liaising with the comrades and deviating from Mr. M's principles or teachings, and most importantly does not see the value of school any longer. Now, a brief outline of Act 2, Scene 1. Thami withdraws from the debating competition. Can I correct? This is not a debate competition. It's a literature quiz competition because of the planned school boycott. He, however, did not inform Mr. M of his decision as yet in the opening scene of Act 2. Isabel questions Thami about the kind of freedom he wants to fight for. Mr. M asks Thami to explain his decision to be involved with the comrades. Thami explained comrades want to avoid any contact with white people. Mr. M explains that he always opposed Bantu education policies. Mr. M reiterates the effectiveness of words in any struggle as compared to violence, like the comrades. Thami informs Mr. M that he has been labeled an informant for the apartheid government and therefore is considered to be a spy. This is a very interesting scene of Act 2, Scene 1, where it starts with Isabel and Thami studying for the literature quiz competition, and then Isabel starts telling Thami about the short biography she's prepared for various English writers, but she soon realizes that Thami is not listening. Thami was not attentive at all. He says that he needs to talk, but he does not know how to start. He doesn't want to mislead Isabel or make her feelings like he's blaming, or make her feel like rather he's blaming her, but he has a problem. Isabel tells him to just tell it like it is, and then there's also a build up of a little bit of tension between the two, when Isabel was aware that there is a change in Thami and in this meeting, because they were supposed to meet to prepare themselves for this literature quiz competition, but she could pick it up that there was something strange about Thami, right? Because Thami was not even concentrating or participating. Isabel notices changes in development, and then I'm going to pause there first. Thami did announce, unfortunately, at this point in time, that he's withdrawing from the literature competition. And the importance of this literature quiz competition was that Mr. M wanted to use the quiz competition to further propel Thami towards the bright future and to ensure that he obtained a scholarship under the circumstances. Remember, this is still under the apartheid regime, and Thami is schooling at a school that is under-resourced, and the policies that were in place and the education policies that were in place was not as good as the education system that was offered to the whites. So therefore one can safely conclude that the opportunities were rather scanty if not limited for black people. So you can imagine if Thami now drops out of this important quiz that Mr. M organized for him, that is going to bring, or rather deepen, the tension between him and Mr. M. And he did mention to Isabel first that, pardon me for that, as I've stated, the significance of this literature quiz. So it is clear now that Thami is joining the comrades to boycott school, and that which is contradictory or deviates from the principle of Mr. M or Mr. M teachings. And then what is interesting to note is that not only is Thami transforming or developing or changing, but so is Isabel, because in this scene Thami does admit that indeed he is quitting the competition. He says yes, and she admits that she was kind of expecting it. Isabel was saying that she had a suspicion that Thami will quit. She explains that even if she's starting to see herself, she's explaining, pardon me, she explained that even she is starting to see the institutions' operations in South Africa, in the South African society, and understand how it has taught her to look down on black people. Isabel asked how Thami plans to tell Mr. M about the decision to quit the competition, but he says Mr. M won't have a choice. She asks if she's at least willing to have a conversation with her about it, but he says there's nothing to talk about since everyone knows what's happening. She calls it unrest, but he calls it isikalo. So Isabel also goes through a form of introspection and transformation here, because of the through meeting Thami and being experiencing life on a different spectrum. She's also evolving. Isabel is awakening from her naivety and ignorant effect that the apartheid system caused over the years. She senses things are not what they seem to be, and she realizes that something major is about to happen. Her interaction with Thami and Mr. M changes and transforms her as a person, as well as her perception of other cultures and apartheid system. She becomes more sympathetic and is eagerly seeking for more. So the interaction between the whole experience for Isabel was also having an impact on how she started to view life in a different light. Isabel also noticed the changes that occur within herself as well. Example, she says that her conversation with someone who is their driver felt so false and forced. I thought I was talking to a 10-year-old. Isabel admits to Thami that she's changing. Previously, her conversation with black people were naively and innocently prejudiced. She would talk down to them, but now she feels uncomfortable when she speaks to Sam or auntie, because she is more aware of the discrimination and inequalities that exist between them. So indeed, this is character development and character transformation. Thami withdraws from the debate competition. Again, I'm correcting, it's not debate, it's from the literature quiz competition. She noticed that Thami's mood was very tense. He was very frustrated. He did not pay attention to Isabel when he was speaking to him. I've already highlighted this. The two reasons why Thami withdrew from the competition is that he is now involved with the comrades. They plan to stay away and boycott campaign, which means minimal contact with white people, because he doesn't want to come across as a sellout. Thami and Isabel become frustrated and angry at each other in this scene. As Isabel says, "Don't be stupid." Thami, "Of course I do." And then they start now to exchange heated arguments, and that's where it brings forth what? Tension. And then there's what you call isikalo, the beginning. Thami refers to the unrest as the beginning of the revolution, drastic change through the struggle, beginning of political change in the country, again, beginning of freedom and equality for all. Isabel, however, realized that the situation in the township is like a bomb waiting to explode, and that the existing peace will not last very long. To her, this beginning that Thami talks about means the end of their friendship. It was said to say that because of the inequalities within the society or within the environment led to, I would say, the end of what seemed to be a beautiful friendship between Thami and Isabel. Thami's fight for freedom versus freedom of association. Isabel and they are going to decide whether or we can be friends. Thami, I was right, you don't understand what's going on. Now, because Thami is now associating with the comrades, there are rules and regulations and the manner in which he must behave, meaning that he must limit his contact with Isabel, because Isabel is a white person, he's going to seem like now he's boycotting or acting against the principles of comradeship, that which is to fight the white supremacy. So therefore you cannot be seen associating with white people, whereas the mandate is to fight the white supremacy. Now, Thami is clearly contradicting himself, because he's fighting for liberation, which is total freedom and equality, but yet on the other hand, he is being dictated or limited by the comrade when they say that he must not be associated with white people. And there's that tension between Mr. M and Thami in this scene, which brings forth emotions of, I would say, hurt and pain, because Mr. M says that you learn your lessons so well, the revolution only just began and you are already word perfect. So then tell me, do you think I agree with the inferior Bantu education that is being forced on you? And then Thami says, you teach it. Now, this exchange of words took place once Mr. M realized that Thami is indeed following the mandate of the comrades and defying him, and also withdrawing from the competition. So you can just imagine this is going to be the build up towards we are almost at the climax of the play. This what Thami said in this heated arguments, where he says that yours were lessons in whispering. There are men now who are teaching us to shout, which suggests a shift in the approach to resistance. Lesson in whispering refers to the subtle, non-confrontational methods of resistance, which were the teachings of Mr. M. Men now teaching us to shout implies a more aggressive confrontational approach advocated by other leaders. Here it means the comrades, possibly representing the broader shift towards more radical resistance during the apartheid era. And that radical resistance talks about boycotting of classes and using forces, if not violence. And we know that Mr. M would vouch for the use of words and education to fight for freedom in contrast to the use of violence. Now, Thami is more like finding his voice. He's even able to reason and express his emotions against Mr. M, which is quite something new, character development, character growth, because we know him to be inferior, because Mr. M has always been so authoritative and Thami has always been his protege, meaning that a protege is somebody who follows others without necessarily questioning their instructions. Now, Thami accuses Mr. M of agreeing with Bantu education. Mr. M clearly is extremely disappointed in Thami, his favorite student, who accuses him of being a traitor. Mr. M defends himself by saying, I regard it as my duty, my deepest obligation to you, young men and women, to sabotage it, which is inferior Bantu education. Remember, Thami is saying that you cannot say that you are fighting Bantu education, whereas you are in class teaching us Bantu education. But then Mr. M, I almost said Mr. Thami, Mr. M vehemently stated that even though I have been your teacher, I was there still in class fighting in the inferior Bantu education. Why inferior? It is because the education system was limiting to the blacks, as it was not education of good stance or of good quality. Hence inferior, because the word inferior it means low in ranking or status or quality. So something that is very low or relatively poor. And even in the book, Thami explains that the comrades' temporary policy against meeting white people is about discipline. And then he further explains that the government is taking away black people's freedom. He says not to the comrades. And one way of is doing so is by giving black people a low quality education, hence it's labeled inferior Bantu education. In fact, he declares that he hates teaching the government's Bantu education curriculum and actively tries to sabotage it in class. This is what Mr. M said as a counter attack to what Thami was accusing him of, to say, but you cannot say that you are fighting it where else you are teaching it. Mr. M says that even though I'm teaching it, I've been actively fighting it, even though I'm fighting it whilst still in the classroom. Now, furthermore, how did Mr. M sabotage Bantu education in his class? The word sabotage, it means to challenge or undermine. Mr. M taught his learners to think for themselves and to think independently. He liberated their minds rather than enslaving them with just an inferior education. And then, irrefutable proof of my success. These are the words of Mr. M, where he said during this heated argument with Thami, that you yourself today, you are able to join the comrades, use your eloquent English to express your views, the same English that I taught you in class. So indeed, Thami is an irrefutable proof of Mr. M's success. Thami is an extremely eloquent, highly intelligent and clever speaker. He is the ultimate proof of how successful Mr. M's teaching skills and techniques were. Mr. M has liberated Thami's mind extensively and has equipped him with the clever ability to play around with words and manipulate his comrades by using using words. Now, what was also worth noting in the heated argument is when Mr. M used an ox as a symbolic representation of power, and then he wanted to convince Thami that there's no need for you and your comrades to use force and violence. The same words that I have taught you, the same intelligence that I've deposited in you, you can use words. Now let us look. Mr. M, tell them the difference. This was Mr. M's advice to Thami, to say, go and teach your comrades to have a different approach to fight the apartheid government rather than using force. He says, tell them the difference between a man and an animal is that man thinks, and he thinks with words. Consider the mighty ox. Now let us see why the importance or the imagery of ox, why Mr. M use the imagery of ox. What is that he wanted, which point he wanted to drive home? Ox is a symbol of strength and stupidity, right? This is a paradox, which is opposite strength and cannot speak, as it cannot speak. People have the ability to speak. It gives them power over animals who are strong but unintelligent. Language, the same way as this language and speaking is more powerful than strength and violence. Mr. M feels that it is more effective to change the ideas and perception of people through words as opposed to the use of violence. And then the important themes in this is a theme of generational divide or intergenerational a conflict. Thami and Mr. M do not see eye to eye. Mr. M believes that the struggle can only be conquered through words, deliberation and negotiations, and that change will occur over a period of time. Thami is impatient and wants to change to happen now, instantly and immediately. Therefore, he resorts to the belief of violence. Then negative effects of apartheid brought division between black and white, as we can see the broken relationship between Thami and Isabel, because now Thami is not in the position to still see Isabel, because that will deviate against the principles of comradeship, that which it says there must be limited contact between black and white, because they are indeed going to fight the whites. Also brought division between black and white, which is Mr. M and Thami. So that will be the end of Act 2, Scene 1, and then in the next video we're going to look into Scene 2, and then of Act 2, that which is also now we're going to see the climax of the play.